Karen Reed, cop killer or cop girlfriend. Today we're going to talk about what Karen could be facing next after her mistrial. This and more on this episode of Charlie Crimebuster. Yep, it's what some people are calling, well, they're calling it the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals interviewed or participating and do not represent those of city, county, state, or federal law enforcement agencies, nor sponsors and platforms of this presentation. Charlie Crimebuster, charliecrimebuster.com, and peacemakernetwork.com are copyrights owned by Charlie Crimebuster. All individuals described or mentioned in the presentation should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This presentation contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions, which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
Well, hello and welcome to another Charlie Crimebuster episode. This is episode 5 in our series, Karen Reed, Cop Killer or Cop Girlfriend. We're going to talk about what she's facing next. And I'm going to share with you the one thing that I think could make a big difference in this coming trial. But first, let's welcome you who have joined us on this episode of Charlie Crimebuster. If you haven't been keeping up with the episodes, let me urge you to go to our website, charliecrimebuster.com, and you can find all of the other episodes leading up to episode 5. By the way, just like to take a moment to thank you who have reached out concerned for our own safety with the tremendous force of Hurricane Helene this past week. Thank you for your concern. We really appreciate it. However, while we're here in Florida a little more prepared, well, it appears millions in the Northeast were not expecting that a hurricane headed to landfall in Florida would be so strong that it would continue up into the heartland of the Appalachian Mountains, all through Georgia, Kentucky, and Tennessee, and all the way up to the Ohio Valley. So let's all take a moment to say a prayer for the multitude of people who have been impacted, and especially for the families of almost 100 people who have died as a result of this terrible storm. Let's take a moment to remember them in our prayers. So thank you for joining us today, and we want to welcome you, and we want to encourage you to reach out with a shout-out. You can reach me, charliecrimebuster, at gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. You can make suggestions about other episodes you would like to see us cover. You can ask questions about the ones that we're covering right now. You can also even lodge objections if you disagree with how we're covering it. There's a safe place for you, we always say, here at Charlie Crimebuster. We also want to remind you that we do now have a YouTube channel, and every week James and I take a moment to discuss the episodes that we drop. And coming this week, we will again sit down and talk about this particular episode. There's always some additional stuff that we add, and we get a little more into detail and maybe clarify some things that we say in the podcasts. So go to Charlie Crimebuster, to the YouTube, just go YouTube and tag it Charlie Crimebuster. You'll find us right there on our YouTube channel. And if you'd like to support the program, we encourage you to go to peacemakernetwork.com. That's peacemakernetwork.com. There you can become a badge, BADGE supporter. You can help us not only produce the podcasts, but hey, you can help us help those brave men and women who are always running toward danger instead of away from danger. Yep, we're talking about the military, first responders, and law enforcement. Read all about it at peacemakernetwork.com. So now let's get into today's program. The Karen Reed story is all about something that happened on January the 29th, 2022. That's when Police Department Officer John O'Keefe of the Boston Police Department, well, he was found lying severely injured outside of the home of Boston Police Officer Brian Albert. That was there in Canton, Massachusetts. Now, O'Keefe, he had been dropped off the night before by his girlfriend, Karen Reed, and that was to join a party that was hosted by Brian Albert and Jennifer McCabe. Now, upon being discovered the very next morning, well, he was transported to a local hospital, and there he died. The cause of death was listed as blunt force trauma and hypothermia. Actually, about 3 days later, Karen Reed, she was arrested, charged with manslaughter, motor vehicle homicide, and leaving the scene of a deadly crash. Now, the district attorney there also, well, they allege that Reed hit O'Keefe with her SUV and then just left the scene. Now, Reed, she pleaded not guilty. She said, no, I didn't do that. But 4 months later, on June the 9th, well, she was indicted again by a grand jury, this time for second-degree murder, motor vehicle manslaughter, and driving under the influence and leaving the scene of a deadly crash. Now, Reed pleaded not guilty again, and her defense attorney, a guy by the name of David Yannetti, he actually shocked folks when he accused the Massachusetts State Police. He said, well, they're manufacturing evidence. He also said that the lead investigator, Trooper Michael Proctor, well, that he had a conflict of interest, should not have been investigating the scene in the first place. That was due to his family's relationship with some of the prosecution's witnesses, including the man whose home where John O'Keefe was found lying in the yard, severely injured. Now, Reed's first trial, well, it came to an end on July the 1st. That's when a jury of 6 women, 6 men, they said over and over again they were hopelessly deadlocked, could not come to any conclusion. And there, Judge Beverly Cannon, she declared a mistrial. So on this episode of the Charlie Crime Train today, we're going to talk about what is going to happen next for Karen Reed. Now, by the way, there are several things that have come to light since this mistrial. Well, for one thing, that trooper Michael Proctor, who sent those terrible texts who appeared to be biased against Karen Reed, he was suspended without pay. His future doesn't look very bright with the state police. You see, he was the lead investigator of the case, showed obvious misconduct, and this did impact the work of the prosecution and allowed the defense to suggest a cover-up from the real truth, according to the defense, of what happened to John O'Keefe. They alleged that he was beat up in the house, brought out to the yard, left to die. But there's also other news about another trooper who also faced disciplinary action from the trial. Most people know about Michael Proctor, but there was also State Police Sergeant Urey. He was also one of the lead investigators in John O'Keefe's death. He had to, we now know, just recently, the results of his investigation, he had to forfeit 5 vacation days. That was following an internal affairs investigation. A spokesperson, well, they confirmed that last week. Now, Urey, he was the subject of an internal affairs investigation. The state police actually announced that right after the trial had ended in a mistrial due to the hung jury. The investigation was prompted because, well, Michael Proctor, those text messages about Karen Reed, which he referred to her in terrible terms, even said he hoped that she would kill herself, commit suicide. Well, those texts were sent to his family, friends, and, listen to this, co-workers. That's what Proctor testified. Now, again, Proctor's on leave without pay. But Sergeant Urey, he also worked with Proctor on the investigation into John O'Keefe's death. And he was one of the people in that group chat in which Proctor sent the inappropriate text messages. And when the Massachusetts State Police, when they actually released the final outcome of Urey's internal affairs investigation, in which he was disciplined by forfeiting vacation days, 5 of them, they said, quote, that the sergeant failed to confirm work standards established for his rank, title, or position. He did that when he failed to properly supervise and/or counsel a subordinate for sending inappropriate correspondence regarding an ongoing investigation. That was the report from Colonel Maughan of the state police. He said he should have both reprimanded Proctor and he should have reported these inappropriate texts. Well, the outcome of Trooper Proctor's investigation, well, it's not yet been revealed. We do know that he's not allowed now to work as a state trooper in the meantime. And again, I don't think he has a very bright future with the state police. So it's now been reported that there are 4 state troopers and 1 Canton police officer that have been under investigation, all of those tied to the Karen Reed trial. However, even when it appears that the prosecution is still planning to bring Karen Reed to justice, and that trial is scheduled in January, well, something else. We reported this last week. Yep, there's going to be a new prosecutor. Yep, Hank Brennan. I mentioned that he was pretty high profile. He had some pretty strong past clients, and he's going to lead the prosecution in this next round. Now, Brennan did say that he wanted justice for John O'Keefe, but he also indicated that he wanted to see fairness. And there are a lot of people who've said a lot of things about the new prosecutor coming on board. Some of the experts said, well, they thought that what the case needed was a reevaluation, sort of a soup to nuts reevaluation. They've got to think, is it really worth expending resources on another trial given what happened in this past trial and all of the evidence that could have been favorable to Karen Reed? That's what Daniel Medwood. He's a criminal law professor at Northeastern University. He did say he thought it was a nice choice to pick this guy to be the new prosecutor. He said that Brennan is a defense lawyer, and that's going to send a signal to the public. That is, look, not just tapping a prosecutor from the next county or something like that, but it's also somebody who's been on both sides of the fence. He understands the mission to prosecute and the duty of a prosecutor. He went on to say it's kind of hard to take a fresh look at something when you've been staring at it for ages. He said that was the problem with the Norfolk County's DA's office. They had been looking at that for years now. They had a pretty fixed opinion of her guilt. He went on to say what Reed's case needs is someone who will really scrutinize the different theories about the backdrop of prior decisions. He went on to say that anybody that joins the case from the outside is bound to go through the file with a fine-tooth comb. She anticipates that the second time around, well, the prosecutors may decide not to call some of the witnesses who were saying the same thing over and over again. She went on to say that it'll probably be shortened. Said might have some new witnesses that weren't called. She said, I would not be surprised if we see almost a different type of case presented at trial the second time. She also noted that in Reed's first trial, many who followed the case found, the prosecution's presentation, a little bit lackluster. I guess that's another word for boring, isn't it? Went on to say, I think the DA was looking for somebody not only who can try the case in a different way, but also present the case to the public in a different way. She said because whether we like it or not, people are involved in the outcome of this case. Thought it would be interesting to see if he's able not only to win the case, but can he change public perception? Because public perception right now pretty well says this case is unwinnable. So what does Reed's camp say about this new prosecutor coming in the lineup? Well, I'm going to give you a quote from her attorneys. The attorney said, quote, the news that Michael Morrissey has decided to use taxpayer funds to hire an outside lawyer to prosecute this case, well, it said it speaks volumes about their confidence in their own team. That's what Alan Jackson said. He said they can bring anyone they want to court. We'll beat this unjust prosecution just like we did the last time. And then he said, like we've said to Mr. Morrissey previously, do your worst. And then he said, we'll see you in court. So there you have it. There's going to be a new prosecutor. Now listen to this. There also might be new charges. Yep, new charges. I want to tell you all about this, and I want to share with you the one thing that will turn this case, that could turn this case around in favor of the prosecution. I'm going to share all of that in a moment coming up. But right now, it is time for our Crazy Crook story of the week. Now, our Crazy Crook story today has to do with kind of a domestic situation. By the way, one of the most dangerous calls that police respond to is a domestic call when two people are fighting, especially if it involves people who are in a relationship. Now, you respond to conflicts of people fighting who may or may not know each other as well. But continuing to escalate things with another person, well, my friend, it usually always leads in trouble. Well, that's what happened to our crazy crook in St. Paul, Minnesota. Justin John Bowden, he's our crazy crook of the week. He was at a bus station up in St. Paul, Minnesota, when he got into an argument with a woman. The problem with these angry interactions, well, you know it. It often can lead to physical violence. And sure enough, this crazy crook ended up punching this woman in the face. Now, my friend, that's called an assault. But he was crazy not just to punch the woman in the face, he also attacked another person who was standing there. So now, instead of having one charge of assault, he has two charges of assault. Now, the problem, when he punched that other guy, well, he dropped a folder he was holding, and stupid enough, he did not pick up that folder. And now I know what you're thinking. Yep, you're thinking crazy crook. They do it all the time. Left his name where police could find him. Yep, that is crazy enough. But wait until you hear what else was in the folder. Yep, the folder? Well, it also contained, well, wait for it. It contained his homework for his anger management class. I'm telling you, people, you can't make this stuff up. So this crazy crook, who takes out his anger on a woman by punching her in the face, then takes on another person by punching them, now facing 2 accounts of assault, is so crazy he leaves incriminating stuff behind, including his anger management homework. My friend, this guy is indeed Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the week. Now back to our main focus. We all know that the defense was appealing an order that the regular judge, who had already handed down an order, they had come to the judge and said, hey, listen, we now know that the jurors had agreed not guilty for 2 of the 3 charges against Karen Reed. So we would like for there to only be 1 charge allowed to come before the trial in this next trial. And the judge that heard that case said, nope, I'm going to rule against you. All the charges can come during the next trial. So now we know that they turned around and appealed this to another court. And here now, listen to this. A justice for the highest court in Massachusetts, well, they've now ruled that Karen Reed's appearance to dismiss 2 of those charges will be heard by a full panel before the decision is made. Here are the words from the high court. Quote, I hereby reserve and report his case without decision for determination by the Supreme Judicial Court of the Commonwealth. That's what Justice Elizabeth Dewar wrote in her ruling issued a couple of weeks ago. Now, Karen Reed's defense team, they submitted a lengthy brief now to the Massachusetts highest court. They're arguing that they should reverse the lower court decision and dismiss 2 of those charges in her high-profile case before that trial begins early next year. Now, in that brief, they say that there's a century of precedent stands that support the primary argument. Reed's first murder trial, we all know, ended in a hung jury. However, defense has said several jurors have come forward to report they were ready to acquit her of second-degree murder and another charge. Now, the Superior Court judge denied that motion to dismiss the charges, a decision that defense is now appealing to the Supreme Judicial Court. Now, what they asked Cannon to dismiss 2 of the 3 charges, they said they did that after they heard several juries say they voted to acquit her. Now, they've now filed a brief this past Tuesday. They outlined 3 arguments in an attempt to reverse Cannon's decision. Primarily, they argue that the jury's alleged agreement that Reed was not guilty on counts 1 and 3 should constitute an acquittal. Now, hold on. They're also saying that protections against double jeopardy preclude a retrial on those counts. Wow. Did you hear that? They're saying in rejecting Mrs. Reed's claim of acquittal that the court relied solely on the lack of an open and public verdict affirmed in open court. The reasoning is rooted in a formalism that has been consistently rejected by the United States Supreme Court and this court in a string of incidents spanning more than 100 years. Now, additionally, they're arguing that Reed is entitled to a post-trial inquiry to see whether the jury really agreed that those 2 charges should be dismissed. And they're asking the Supreme Court to determine whether it was right for Cannon to declare a mistrial when she did. So, we're going to have a battle in the Supreme Court. Now, the District Attorney's Office of Norfolk, they've acknowledged the appeal, and they said their responses will be filed according to the rules and regulations of the Supreme Court Justice. Earlier this month, District Attorney Michael Morsey, we all know, has now named a new attorney. He may be involved in writing the response to this appeal. Now, according to a schedule published by the Supreme Court, the prosecution will be given until October the 16th to file its brief. Reed's attorneys will have to October the 25th to then file a reply. And oral arguments, well, they could be held as soon as November. Boy, that's not too long before the next trial begins, right? So now, let's take a look at what the prosecution may do differently this time around. Well, my friend, the first thing I guess the prosecution's got to figure out what they're going to do with old Michael Proctor. Boy, I tell you, he's a gift that just keeps on giving, isn't he? That guy has caused a whole lot of problems for the prosecution. Well, what are you going to do about it? I mean, he is the lead prosecutor. A lot of the work that was done on the case was done by him, so you can't really just totally ignore him. And even if you decided to bring another prosecutor on, or not another prosecutor, but if you decided to bring another investigator on, I should say investigator, he wasn't the lead prosecutor, he's the lead investigator. If you were to bring another investigator on, and you can do that because you have a new prosecutor, then if you don't bring Michael Proctor to the stand, guess who will bring Michael Proctor to the stand? You can bet everything you've got that the defense will call him up, and they will again expose him for being biased. They will expose him for police misconduct, and they will again try to paint him as the guy who, because of his misconduct, you could easily think maybe he planted the evidence there that would describe that tail light and the glass that was found around John O'Keefe's body. So Proctor is somebody you're going to have to deal with. So in my opinion, the prosecution probably will bring him to the stand, and they probably do the same thing because they will try to minimize as much as they can his misconduct, to say that even though there was misconduct, there's no proof whatsoever that he planted any evidence. There's no proof whatsoever that he did anything to the case other than to approach it from a biased opinion. You see, if the prosecution does it, then they can minimize some of the damage. If they do not do that, and the defense brings him on, then it's going to have a greater impact upon the jury. So now there's a couple of things as we think about this. They could go for a lesser charge and basically say, as we've said before, that maybe it was an accident. Maybe she did not intend to do harm to him, but accidentally she did harm to him. They would have a greater chance of getting a guilty plea with that, I believe, than the other way around. The next thing that they can do is they can focus in on the fact that the defense has said that the injuries are not consistent to being hit by that SUV. Now, you and I know that there have been millions of accidents in this world. I believe the prosecution use something like IA or something like that, research accidents, and if they could find a similar situation where people knew without a shadow of a doubt that a person was hit by a vehicle reversing at 24 miles per hour, and they saw similar injuries to another person where there was no doubt that that's what happened, then it would help the jury to find reasonable probability that that could have happened in this case. They did not do that in the first case. The defense had these ARCA investigators, scientists, physics, who said to the contrary, that the injuries were not consistent to being hit with a vehicle going at 24 miles per hour. Remember, the prosecution said, well, hit his arm, caused those scratches, spun him around, hit his head on the curb, and then somehow he ended up 10 yards into the yard. Well, they could have also said that, well, when he hit his head, he did get up, stumbled around a little bit, and went 10 yards and then fell down. But they did not prove that. So if the prosecution is able to find another set of accidents just like that happened there and prove that those same type of injuries could take place, I think that would speak volumes and help them in the case. Now, they could also, of course, approach him with a plea deal, but I doubt the defense is going to take a plea because they already almost had a not guilty in this last trial. Now, as far as the defense is concerned, they're not going to have to do a lot more creativity than what they've already done. Just stay where they are. Bolster up that testimony of those ARCA investigators who were not hired by the prosecution, not hired by the defense, and maybe make it a little stronger. And I think that they've already got their case already lined up. They're not going to have to do much changing at all. But the prosecution's going to have to change a whole lot of things if they're going to get a guilty verdict. Well, there you have it, friend. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think this will go to trial? Do you think they'll offer a plea trial? Do you think a plea deal? Do you think she'll take a plea deal? Do you think if they bring it to trial on a lesser charge that she will be convicted then? Or do you think that there'll be a not guilty plea? Love to hear what you would have to say about it. Reach out with a shout out, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. If you'd like to support the program, go to peacemakernetwork.com. Don't forget the YouTube episode that's coming out this week. James and I will talk about this. If you've got suggestions on what you'd like to see us talk about, send it, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Till this time, next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, be safe, be alert. For the life you save, it may be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. You can find additional podcasts at charliecrimebuster.com. You can also support our first responders, military, and law enforcement communities at peacemakernetwork.com. Or subscribe to our YouTube channel using tag @CharlieCrimebuster. Even visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/CharlieCrimebuster. Or if you would like to make suggestions for future podcasts, please send your ideas to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you will join us next week for another exciting crime story with Charlie Crimebuster.